Can Elliot retire yet? That's the question. Let's see if we can find an answer.
That's right. I hope so.
How you doing, Elliot?
Oh, pretty good. How about you, Josh?
I'm doing well. I'm really excited to have this conversation today. I think we've talked about it a little bit and we've discussed where you are on your financial journey, and cat's kind of out of the bag now. You and I have had the privilege of being
Yeah.
on the Mile High Five podcast, and Doug pulled it out of you. It sounded like you mentioned that you're going to be stepping away, or the plan is to enter early retirement in about the next year and a half or so.
Yeah. Yeah. Shout outs to all of the new listeners from Mile High Five. We have seen you in our analytics, so welcome. But yes, was able to put some dates and numbers out there, and hopefully you'll hold me accountable that I won't slip on my date. Is now that it's been articulated, just like our good buddy Carl. Once the internet knows about it, you can't make any changes, right?
That's right. But of course, you can certainly make changes, but I do think that it is a good exercise for anyone to go through whenever they're trying to decide, should I or shouldn't I? And for me, I did something similar where I just had to make an announcement. It wasn't as large of an audience as what you did, but I picked a date in the future and I kind of put that stake in the ground and I said that's going to be my date. And I even told my boss like 14 months prior that I was going to be leaving, but I always gave a caveat and said unless something significant changes. That was always my escape hatch, that I could get out, or stick around, I should say, if things went south.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. And yes, I reserve the right to throw this plane in the trash if everything goes belly up. But yeah, all things fair and equal, I would say. The plan is March of 2027.
Do you have a day of the week in mind, or a date?
I guess I do. Is theoretically, it really ties out to when my restricted stock units vest. That's really the magic date. So anytime after March 1st is fair. And I haven't looked at the calendar of what that really looks like in 2027, which is what I imagine that you did
Yeah.
here. But turns out that's a Monday.
Right. Yeah, March 1st is a Monday. I was trying to see if there was any significant dates. Of course, you have Pi Day in March, but that is on a Sunday, so that's probably not very significant for you.
I know that generally people say if you're gonna leave an employer, do it at the beginning of the month. At least you get your healthcare benefits for a whole nother month, things of that nature. But yeah, nothing nothing too special
All
about it
right.
beyond hey, you get the next tranche of RSUs says it's all yours.
That's right. Well, with all the caveats aside and the date that we have in mind now, let's kind of go through and use this as another form of a case study and just talk through where you currently stand, where you hope to be. And I have a series of questions that we may or may not get through all of them, but just to kind of talk through not only the financial aspects of it, but the psychological aspects and all the questions that people might have whenever they're trying to make such a significant life changing decision.
All right. As far as my phi number, and maybe before that is I'm gonna call out one more year syndrome. And really, I listened to an episode of the Choose FI podcast today, and Big Earn was talking on it today. And I'm sure you and much of our audience is familiar with his, I think it's, does he just call it his stock series? It's like a 60-page early retirement withdrawal scope. But Big Earn was a former CFA. He lives and breathes this stuff from, he's a PhD. He's a very intelligent individual. So he's written extensively about it, and there were questions about the 4% rule. if your time horizon is longer than 30 years, how does that affect that 4% rule of thumb is, I think a lot of people are calling it now. And then another, I would say the other end of the spectrum that I know Big Earn tends to be more on the conservative side is we've got Bill Bengen, who was kind of the original author of the 4% rule before it was later studied in the Trinity study. But he's just recently come out with a new book later this year that supposedly is saying that number could be as high as 5.5. And I know Frank Vasquez is also in the camp of, I'll just call it optimism for lack of anything else, to say that by changing your portfolio in a drawdown scenario and really optimizing that those numbers, that 4% rule is really conservative even from the time of when it originated, and that updated guidance is much greater than that.
Yeah, I think maybe just a couple points. One, to clarify just for the audience, and we probably mentioned it before, but you are, my memory serves me right, you're currently 38 because you're 10 years younger than me. And this timeline would put you, you would have just barely turned 40, right, in 2027.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So I've got a February birthday, so I will be freshly 40. So I mean, I guess that makes it a nice clean number. At one point in time, I thought the number was going to be 42 for all those Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy fans out there. But yeah, no, I think if everything goes off without a hitch, that magic number is 40.
Yeah, and so that really, going back to your point about the timeline of withdrawal, that's where the potentially the concern that you would have is it would be greater than 30 years because you're far younger than traditional retirement age.
Yes. And so that was part of the point that Big Earn was making. His name's Carson. Carson was making is that Bill Bengen's original study and the Trinity study does assume that it's portfolio exhaustion. It's not just your interest that you've accumulated on your portfolio, but that it actually consumes the entire portfolio in the Monte Carlo simulations that you're actually running for. Did this portfolio succeed over time? Right. And so Carson's run multiple regressions since then to say, okay, if we lengthen it out from 30 years to 40 years to 50 years, how does that ultimately change the, I would say, the safe withdrawal assumptions? From his point of view, I believe, if to correctly summarize, is he takes a more conservative approach. He believes that number should be in the more 3.5, 3.3, whatever range. Whereas we do have, I would say, the other end of the spectrum, Mr. Money Mustache, Carl Jensen, and others have really tried to flip this on its head and say, instead of the 1 more year syndrome, what about the 1 year less? And say, the only thing that is absolutely true is the longer that you work is the less time that you have doing exactly what you want to do in with your freedom. I think Brad from Choosify kind of took the middle ground. Is not enough data to conclusively say, but would like to see more data.
I've listened to a lot of the commentary out there, and I guess that where I kind of land, I'm nowhere near as intelligent as most of these people, but I think about it in terms of, are we over analyzing and potentially costing ourselves, like you just said, that time that we could have been doing something else? Perhaps it's starting a different small business that's going to offset any kind of risk that you were landed on the 5% rule, and now you're suddenly able to offset that by even a half a percentage or whatever it might be. That you're going to have that freedom and that free time to be able to allow you to explore other options. And to me, in my opinion, that potential reward is far greater than the risk of continuing down that path of the one more year syndrome, or even worrying about whether or not you're exactly at that number for whatever percentage of withdrawal rate you want to look at, whether it's 4.5, 5, or 3.5, whatever. I think that, to me, and it's easy for me to say because we've had conversations where, well, my wife's not ready to pull the trigger yet, even though we have plenty of money for her to be able to cut back. But anyway, I'll go ahead and stop there and see if you want to, if you're comfortable, you can go ahead and share some of your numbers.
I will go ahead and share those numbers, and maybe prior to that, I will give kind of a heads up on where our expenses are so that you can kind of level set what we think our five number should look like. So life is lumpy. We've had years where our expenses have exceeded $100,000. Like, I think last year was one of those years, but we also purchased a car. We added a deck onto our house. These are large expenses that are, you make once every, hopefully, 20, 30 years. Not the car necessarily, but you've listened to some of our car episodes, so you hear our opinions on that as well. As far as 4% or 5% on that number, if using strictly the 4% rule, that would be a portfolio of $2.5 million. If you were to use the 5% rule, that would be a $2 million portfolio. We do have some upcoming expenses that we would expect to drop. So next year, my sons both will start kindergarten. So I will no longer have that pre-K expense for them, which equates to about $7,000 a year. That's pretty good for nearly a 10% reduction in costs of my overall budget. And then over time, we have a 15-year loan. So our last payment on our house will be made in December of 2035 if we don't prepay anything, which at a mortgage rate of 2.5%, don't intend to do any of that. So that would be an additional $14,500 that would drop out of the budget. So overall, even with those expenses kind of gone, call it 80,000 in expenses, just broadly. So 4% of that would be 2 million, 5% would be 1.6.
And of course, all those numbers are in today's dollars.
Yes. So the other piece of that is that we also talked about in one of our previous episodes, looking to kind of set up our kids for success. My parents paid for my education, and I think that was a great leg up kind of in today's society, is being able to enter the workforce in the black, so to speak. So we have the intent to set aside a gift, whether they use that for education or housing, weddings, whatever they really want to use that for, sometime around college age or post high school times. Of course, the only other, I guess, piece of that is just needing the present value of whatever that sum of money is to get to that full amount by, in this example, by the time my kids start hitting age 18.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that part there, because if you were just looking at it from the perspective of you wanted to give them a flat $100,000 each in whatever form that turns out to be, college or down payment on a home or whatever, if you set aside a certain amount of money today, it could grow to that 100,000. Of course, there could be challenges with that as well, but I think, or I guess another way of looking at it is whatever your investments continue to do over the next 10 to 15 years for that timeline, you would just pull that at that time. So you're not necessarily separating it. So it's just continuing to grow as regular invested money, right?
Right. And that's basically our strategy. You'll see as I kind of walk through our current assets that while we do have 529s for our kids, just the limitations that, let's say, our kids don't go to college, or it is just a restricted vehicle in and of itself. And so to not kind of put those artificial handcuffs on us, take a little bit of a tax hit in making it not the most efficient possible vehicle to fund that expense, but ultimately you're paying for that
Mhm.
flexibility. So, to the numbers, as far as the pre tax retirement account, and this will be joint accounts for both myself and Dawn throughout all of these. So if we have multiple accounts, I just sum them up for simplicity's sake. So 401k, we're just shy of 700,000. Traditional IRA, we've got 215,000. Roth IRA, we have 37,000. In the HSA, we have 57,000. In our taxable brokerage account, we have approximately 260,000. I call it the taxable 2 account, which is composed of restricted stock units from work as well as my employee stock purchasing plan. There is 82,000 in there. However, of that 82,000, currently only 33,000 of that is truly available to me. The rest is on a rolling maturity schedule that happens every March, like I alluded to earlier. In cash and cash equivalents, 13,000, and college savings via 529s 200 or 22,000. So in total that comes to 1.352 million and 22K in college savings.
Very good. And on that 22K in college savings, is what's your strategy going forward? So you talked a little bit about the choice to not necessarily fund the 529s as much as that's something that you're going to still be putting some money in, but you're not looking to have significant sums in those accounts by the time that they're college age.
Right. Yeah. So we have family that does like to contribute like birthday gifts and things of that nature into those accounts. So we have them available. But as far as actual savings for, if it was like paying for either college or that gift that we would speak of, that really would have to be funded either by our taxable accounts or the strategy that we intend to use once we get into retirement is Roth laddering, doing Roth conversions. So it would have to be out of that component as well.
And then going back to the gift that you want to give to your kids that call it 300K in the next 15-ish years, are you thinking that that money is going to come out of the full like nest egg, or are you accounting for it in the same way? So in other words, when you say in today's dollars, my annual expenses, call it 100K, when you look at that over the course of what you're going to need for your withdrawal, are you saying that the 300K that will go to your kids is coming out of that and is a part of that calculation of what your expenses will be, or is that going to be separate?
Yeah, so that's a good point. I would say that we haven't thought about it in great detail yet. Overall, beyond just having the summation of, hey, we need to have this amount of money by that time, but having it in the right bucket to kind of make things the most efficient.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't thought about all of the mechanics of that. Certainly because, like, if we're doing Roth conversions, you're going to say, if our expenses really are 80K a year, Like that's one thing. You still have what, another, I think it's 16,000 a year that you can get and still be in that lowest bracket where you're paying virtually $0. But theoretically, if that doesn't meet the demand, then it's like, okay, are we going to take out that additional, take the what, 15% tax hit that kind of comes along with that to make sure that you have the correct amount of money to pay for those expenses? Yeah, certainly potentially a blind spot that I need to work through each of those steps.
You've talked through where we are today. Take us through the next step of between the now and the retirement date, which is here we are in November. What are we looking at? What's my math? 12, 13, 14, 15, it's like 16 months or so down the road. And we have a gap of at least 600K, correct?
Yeah, so it really kind of comes down right to what what you're saying, really the level of comfort
Mm-hmm.
is, right? If our expenses are still truly 100K, then it would be a $2 million number. If our expenses drop, now we know our expenses are going to drop next year by 7K, then that takes it to that, well, takes it to a lower number. It's not to that 1.6 because that would be with 20K reduced. Now, I will say a component of this that isn't anywhere in any of the planning and assumptions right now is also, I've talked about this a little bit, that Dawn has also had her own side business that she has been operating. And so to date, there is nothing in here that is planning for the income that she's making. And she is making income. She's pulling a salary every month that and still making profit in her business and increasingly upping that amount next year. So I would say the number that really we're trying to target is probably closer to that 1.6, and maybe that's optimism more than anything else. But yeah, that also, there is a component of this that in a year, we are saving approximately, I think it's 126K across basically all of these different vehicles. And that's still non inclusive of, I believe, my employer match and my any distributions from my employer stock purchasing plan, just because some of these are pretty hard to quantify how how much I'm actually returning in those things. So all of this to say, yeah, there's a lot of flexibility out there. And if anything, I think just like Carson was saying, that with a longer time horizon, you've got some people that are going to be pessimistic and say, yeah, hey, you need twice the amount of money because it's twice as long. That's too conservative. You know, you've got some people that say, oh, I don't need any more because, you know, it's just good enough. Well, that might be too aggressive. I think we're kind of more, we're certainly more on the optimistic side and trying, like you said, to be open to the idea of kind of what comes next, even though there isn't necessarily the plan for what comes next.
We'll get to that in just a minute, I think, with some of the questions that I had. But let's imagine that you are nearing the finish line. It's within sight. You can see the banner up ahead. You know that that date is right around the corner, and you probably want to give your employer a certain amount of notice. I'm assuming it's something greater than 2 weeks. Have you thought about how much notice you want to give to your employer? And what I'm trying to do here is that, like, what point are you going to be comfortable with looking at the number and waking up and saying, okay, we are close enough, or hopefully you're well beyond that comfort zone, and it's not even an issue. You're just trying to cross that threshold of getting those RSUs and the bonus and all those things that come for that time of year. But how much notice do you want to give to your employer? I guess let's start with that question.
Well, Josh, you're a better man than I, or I am much more cynical than you are. I will say I kind of got bit by this metaphorical snake before. I gave notice to a former employer that was within their policy of I gave them 4 weeks notice for a company that I had been there nearly a decade, and they walked me out the door the next day. I did get paid out for those 4 weeks. However, there was a retroactive salary bump that essentially I was owed, and they opted not to pay me that couple of $1,000, types of thing. And so I think somebody said this to me the other day is once it hits my bank account, I think then I don't see giving any more than 2 weeks. My mind will probably just be really not in it at that point. And so I'm a bad example. I'm probably a bit too burned out to be a great corporate citizen, but I think at that point I'll be skipping over to my desk to hand over that letter.
Knowing yourself is a good place to be. We come from somewhat different, I guess, roles and responsibilities where I would, if we had to put labels on ourselves, which I hate doing, but just to kind of give a little bit of context, I think you're more of on the individual contributor level, and I essentially a middle manager. So I had people leaders below me and then a larger team below them. And I only say that to say that I felt like a certain level of confidence, and I knew my leadership team very well. I'd been with the organization for 25 years. I knew most of the people that I'd worked with for a couple of decades, and I just wanted to be I wanted to give them that notification so that they could plan and we could work on a transition plan together, because I did have a sense of pride in the people that reported to me, and I wanted to kind of look out for them and hopefully help hire a good backfill that would be a good fit for the team. And the guy that I was reporting to when I left, I had known him for many years, and just there was a lot of mutual respect. So I did not ever have the concern of they're going to let me go early. And if they had, I mean, that would have probably been great, but it would have caused me to have bad feelings towards them, because I wouldn't have wanted to be in that situation knowing that there was still some financial milestones that I wanted to cross during that 14 months. But it was also because that I was reporting to a brand new manager, and when he came in, it was the first time that we met, and we were going through talking about the team and all of the things, and the last you kind of wrapped up. He's like, "Is there anything else?" And that's how I laid it on him. I'm like, "Yeah, actually, there's one thing I wanted to let you know." And it felt a little surreal. It felt like a kind of a little bit of an out of body experience, because this was the first person in the organization that I was telling. And I said, "I wanted to let you know that," and this it was funny because it was February of 2024, and I said I wanted to let you know that I'm planning to leave in April of 2025. And he was kind of confused, shocked. I mean, you could see like all these emotions coming across his facial expressions, where he was like, you mean this April? Like in 2 months?" And I'm like, "No, like 14 months from now, next year, next April." And he's like, "Oh, okay, really? Okay, cool." And he was like happy that I gave him that much notice. So, and then we didn't talk about it all that often, but it did come up every, I would say every 3 or 4 months. We kind of touched on it just to like, so I let him know, "Hey, I'm still on this path, and this is still my date. I'm still looking at April 11th," and we planned accordingly. And thankfully, we were able to hire my backfill with me still having a couple months left, and I was able to hand off my responsibilities and kind of just blend the team, and felt really good about the transition.
Well, I'm glad for you, Josh. Yeah. No, no, and certainly I think my old company, I felt in a very similar way. I was a people leader there. I had been there for, like I said, 10 years. Like you build that rapport with people over a period of years. Now, I've been with this employer for a number of years as well, but much larger organization. Like you said, I am an individual contributor now, so I I feel much more like just a cog in the machine. So impact is a little bit different.
So going back to visualizing the timeline, you're at the last couple of weeks. You're mid-February. Things have started to hit, the bonus payout, all those things that you mentioned earlier are starting to roll in. And you wake up and you look and I mean, you kind of have an idea of where you're going to be, obviously, as you're approaching the finish line. So, have you thought about if you're within that 1.6 range, how much of a percentage off of that 1.6 that you would be comfortable with?
No, I haven't. I think the fact that we are running optimistic, for lack of a better word, I would have to feel pretty on that number, have to have surpassed that number not to continue to go down that path. I think one of the things that Brad had said in Choose FI lately is just in some examples where he's like, you're just you're just not FI right now, right? And maybe the definition of you're not FI right now is, by every definition, I'm coast FI right now, right? I could do a lot of different things, but yeah, I mean, if I'm at 155, then by that time, in a year from now, I'll be ringing you up and being like, "What the heck do I do, Josh?" No, I think if anything, I would probably still just go through with it. Is I am. It would have to be pretty catastrophically bad for me not to kind of continue with the plan. Is I feel like I've just kind of gotten to that point where my drive in what I'm currently doing just isn't there, and I'm going through the motions. I'm still doing good work, but ultimately my heart's not in it, and so I know that about myself to say, there's a big wide world out there, and last I checked, it doesn't have to be in this little niche that I've found myself in. There's plenty of other things I could go do to occupy my time.
Yeah, I think to your point on you're just not FI right now, I would say that while that's true, that doesn't mean you have to continue to work in the job that you don't necessarily enjoy or even work full time or you could fill in the blank of all the things that you can do because even though you're just not FI. And then also I wanted to add that it's been a fun journey to kind of like watch you develop this mindset, and maybe the little bit of a break that you had over the last couple of months has solidified this a little bit, but I think it wasn't all that long ago that you were still questioning a lot of this, and it's it's really inspiring, I think, for me to see that you've kind of put that stake, so to speak, in the ground and you're like, yep, that's my timeline and that's what I'm going with. Obviously, still with the caveat that if things go completely sideways, that might not be the best decision at that time. But as we sit here now, within the next 14 months or so, you will not have a full-time job.
Fingers crossed. But yeah, no, I certainly believe that to be the case.
Awesome. Awesome. Do you want to take us through your thoughts on healthcare?
Sure. So I actually logged on to healthcare.gov for the first time ever today, as I've been a beneficiary of employer healthcare, since I've been out of college, and just tried to throw in some numbers to try and get a quantification of, you know, the ACA credits and what healthcare costs would even really look like. And so I put in AGI of $80,000 in here. Once again, maybe that's too conservative or too aggressive, whichever way you want to frame that. That essentially that's not enough money for us to live on based off our expenses, but I just used it for back of the napkin math. And based off of my age, my wife's age, my kids' ages, that came back with a $540 a month tax credit and then you start looking at the different plans that really popped out and are available, really ranged anywhere from a plan that is a bronze plan on healthcare.gov that was $241.60 per month with the small deductible of 15 grand annually, all the way up. That was a bronze plan. There's silver plans, there's gold plans. I mean, all the bells and whistles of selecting any other, healthcare plan. But honestly, the highest that I saw, I think, was in the mid 600s a month. So you're talking about anywhere from not too insane amount of money is in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and for a family of five, that's probably not too bad. Do you know what you pay today in your portion of the
Yes,
healthcare?
$0.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I am very lucky in that my employer offers kind of three different plans specifically for medical coverage. And they have a plan that is of no cost to the employee and essentially their family. And I do have additional fees for, I also get dental and vision through them, and I pay small sums of money for that. But yeah, for medical, I pay $0
Wow,
today.
that's rare. Did you
Yes.
happen to
Yes.
do any kind of comparison of what your today's insurance looks like in comparison to this bronze, silver, gold equivalents?
Yes, I did. I did very little, I will say. Even I know that the plan that I'm on is also a high deductible plan. I contribute to an HSA every year, and actually all three of the plans that are offered through my employer are also HSA eligible plans. But the so I mentioned on that first plan it had a deductible of 15,000 for a family total, and I think the plan that we're under right now is 14,800 or something like that. I mean, it's very close to the family deductible. Now, I didn't look at what the individual deductible is on the one that was out on healthcare.gov, but like the individual one that I'm on right now, I think is 6,800 maybe. And I've got a few of the other, like, I mean, I can see a silver plan here that the premium jumped up to $470 a month and the deductible dropped down to 6 grand. So I mean, most of these it just changes what is the deductible, how much you pay in copays, but honestly, they weren't vastly different. But I mean, I think that there were also like 70 different options.
Sure.
So, you know,
So you're looking somewhere in the range of about $5,000 a year in out of
right.
pocket premiums. Is
Yep.
that factored into your expenses?
Yes and no. So I would say it is in the fact that the budget that we have today has a very large range of flexibility in it. It has a lot of money allocated to travel. It has a lot of money allocated to going out to eat, and so on and so forth. And obviously, it's also built around having a family of five children, or three children and five people. So obviously, as time progresses, like my food budget will likely increase until all of my kids leave the house because they will eat more things than, my one son's favorite thing in the world are pickles and salami. His palate will likely increase from that, but there are also things where I think we've budgeted maybe 12,000 for travel right now that certainly we don't intend to necessarily use that every year. Or if there was a need, we could always ratchet that back to say, you know, like we talked about earlier, we took all five of us went to Europe for over over a month this year. You know, trips like that don't have to happen. Like, that is certainly a luxury that, just like many people have talked about, is having a guardrails kind of approach to your expenses. And we, I guess I don't have the number offhand to say, yep, hey, this is our rice and beans diet versus, hey, this is today's kind of Cadillac expertise.
Once the boys are in school full time and you don't have that expense, knowing that you don't have debt, you don't have car expenses, you have your mortgage. For a family of five, I can't imagine that, aside from the mortgage, I can't imagine that $40,000 a year still in the low cost of living area that we are currently in isn't unreasonable if you were really looking for that low end threshold of this is what
Sure.
a decent lifestyle would look like, where we have a little bit of entertainment. Maybe it's going to all the local national parks, not traveling to Europe, or, whatever that might look like. I'm sure that's a pretty low end to have a pretty decent lifestyle still.
Right, absolutely. I mean, there's so many things and different levers that you can pull. And obviously, like I've mentioned over with Doug, and I talked about in my origin story as well, is the fact that, 80% of my family, excluding me, all have Italian passports. So, there's lots of different levers that theoretically we could pull if we ever wanted to do that as well. If we wanted to spend time in a lower cost of living area for a period of time, if the situation ever arose that we would need to do that or we wanted to do that, those are all opportunities that we could probably accomplish.
Sure. All right. Well, let's turn our attention a little bit to the lifestyle side of things and what life will look like once you get there. So we've had previous conversations where you've talked through kind of your perfect day and what that looks like. And I'll kind of paraphrase a little bit that spending time with your family, making yourself available, you are going to also set aside a portion of your day for quote unquote work and whatever that might look like. So one of the questions that I have for you is, do you have any big goals or plans that you want to pursue once you retire? Have you given any thought to like what exactly you're going to be pursuing aside from just the family life?
In short, no, no, I really haven't. I mean,
Podcast, I thought was going
the
to be your answer.
yeah, I mean the podcast. Yeah. Oh, I mean you teed that one up, and
Swing
I
and a miss.
completely whiffed. Yeah. Yeah, I mean certainly the podcast. I would say the other things that I have been focused on right now have been learning Italian. I do aspire to get fluency, a B2 fluency, so that I could pass a fluency exam and join the ranks of my family in their citizenship. However, outside of that, I mean, it could be something like learning an instrument again. I was a clarinetist in high school. My couple of buddies have a band that they play around in, and they told me to jump on the keys the other night, and I probably did my best friend cat expression. So I haven't played piano since I was probably like 5 years old. So maybe it's to pick up the piano. But in short, no, I really haven't thought about anything outside of this podcast and really kind of focusing in on things that I actively have ongoing so far. In the past, I was home brewer. I like drinking a good beer, so maybe I would pick that back up with
Drink
more
more beer
time.
as well.
But yeah, yeah, exactly. Doesn't go so well with prolonging my life and my health goals, but who knows?
Do you have any concerns about being bored or not being able to fill your time?
No, I really don't. I think in the past I did, but with kind of some of these times away from work where I have kind of, in essence, had like a mini retirement. Yeah, I think I've kind of put those concerns to bed that I really feel like even in those times where I wasn't working, that I was like, man, how did I ever have time for work? And and now kind of being back in the saddle, it's very different how I know you and I talked before we hit record on this one that you had remarked that I feel busier, and I do feel it is certainly how much time and thought we really put into a career and something that typical 9 to 5 job, while you may think you're just punching in, punching out, weighs heavier on your mind than I think a lot of us give credit to.
Yeah, I heard a conversation today. The guy was far way and above his with his net worth, his invested net worth, his liquid net worth, if you will, compared to his expenses. I mean, he could have left his job by now, and he's still hanging on. And he said, "I just don't really know what I'm going to do with my time." And I was like, "Wow!" Like so many thoughts just racing through my head with a statement like that. That I just and the guy sounds like he's very intentional with his time. He's into fitness. He's got kids. He's got friends and family and hobbies, but like he doesn't see how he can fill those. And it sounds like a bit of a case of anxiety or identity crisis. I don't know what, but I'm just like, as a person that have been driven to have a successful career, to be able to have a real estate company, to be a parent and be a husband and like all these things, you can't find anything else that would light you up, that would be an interest, or at least have the idea that I could go experiment with things and it might not just take off. I mean, I think about myself just as an example. I took up running for a while. I haven't necessarily stuck with that, but I mean, there's so many like things that you can experiment with, like this podcast is another example. It might really light you up and you have that free time to be able to explore. And it's just still so shocking to me to hear people say that they just really don't know what they would do with their time, that extra 40 plus hours that would be given back to them if they just left and relied on their investments.
Right. I mean, I get it. It's scary that first time. I think that's all it really comes down to is kind of the fear of the unknown, right? It's just kind of being able to sit down. I don't know if you're someone that practices meditation. I have tried it at times. That has never really caught on for me, but it's kind of a similar practice. Is just kind of sitting down and not having anything else to do and being comfortable with just being and you know understanding what your thoughts are saying and seeing where it drives you. So yeah, it's I think it's an important exercise that everybody really should do.
Yeah. Well, Elliot, is there any other topics that you want to discuss around this situation and this upcoming life change of yours?
Nothing that immediately comes to mind. I think it really does feel surreal when you say that it's 14 months from now. Is that really what you said? 14 months from now?
Well,
So if I theoretically, right,
I mean,
it's not quite that.
it's
It
maybe a
was
little bit longer.
16 months, right? Yeah. But I mean, regardless, it's not that far away from the time of when you actually handed in your notice
Mhm.
and in your own life, parallel to this situation, right? Is that seems very surreal to me is now seeing your progression from when obviously I've known you from pre-retirement Josh to retirement Josh, and how different life can be just on the other side of this great journey we call fire, right?
Yeah. I put in from today's date through February 15th, 2027, it's 1 year, 3 months, and 11 days, or 15 months and 11 days, or 66 weeks and 6 days, or 468 calendar days. And one of the things that I did as I was getting close to the end is I put in it was a little app. It was a calculator for the number of days left, days remaining, or something like that. So every day on my phone, it counted down the days that I had left, and they were calendar days, not work days.
I was going to say that was going to be my next question. Was it calendar days or work days?
Yeah, it was calendar days. So you're currently sitting at about 468.
Yeah, that's incredible to hear that number and to hear that it's really so low. I mean, I know that even I had a conversation with my brother over the weekend, and yeah, kind of said the approximate timeline, and he's like, "Man, I didn't realize that it was so close. I was really thinking that I was that close to that date." And yeah, it's it's shocking, but and in a lot of ways, right, is, people may hear my story and say, once again, he's not fi, he's burned out, he's ripping the cord, whatever. And maybe you're right, but to some extent, I think I'm just trying to be the optimist, to the 1 year less as opposed to the 1 year more, and be open to the opportunities of whatever freedom presents my way, because I think that's the greatest insight that I think I've learned from you even along the way is I know that you're retired, and I know that you are busy all the time too, Josh. Is you find plenty of things to occupy, ways to occupy your time. Is I'm not afraid that I'm going to be bored. There's plenty of things to go do, and yeah, I'm just excited to tick down the days.
Well, I'm excited for you, and I think that's probably a good ending to this conversation. And I really hope that people can find value in your story and hopefully some inspiration. And if we have any questions, if anybody has anything that they'd like to ask Elliot, please feel free to reach out. And any other closing thoughts from you, Elliot?
I don't think so. Really hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you liked it, like, subscribe, do all the things. We've certainly noticed the influx of people that came over from Mile High Fi, so we thank you for joining us, and hopefully you've enjoyed the content so far.
Sounds good.
Until next time.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Elliot.
All right. Thanks,
See ya.
Josh.